The Nexus station buzzed with activity as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for the annual Imperial War Games. Commander HFY stood at the observation deck, his forearms crossed behind his back, watching the various species prepare their champions. His purple chiton gleamed under the station's artificial lights, and his compound eyes reflected the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. As the Queen's premier soldier of the Catharan Empire, HFY commanded respect wherever he went. His species had conquered 17 star systems, and their military prowess was legendary throughout the sector. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with natural armor plating and enhanced reflexes, the Catharans were born warriors. "Commander," his aide approached nervously, "the preliminary roster has been finalized." HFY took the datapad without looking away from the training grounds below. His eyes scanned the list of competitors. Vorthon berserkers with their rage-induced strength multiplication, silicate warriors whose bodies could withstand direct plasma hits, ethereal mind-benders who could manipulate reality itself, and dozens of other formidable species. Then, he saw it. Human? HFY's mandibles clicked in amusement. "What is this creature? I am not familiar with this species." His aide shuffled uncomfortably. "They are a newly discovered race from a small blue planet on the outer rim. Bipedal, carbon-based, no natural armor, no enhanced strength, no special abilities that we can detect." HFY's compound eyes focused on a figure in the training area below. The human stood barely 2 meters tall, with pale skin and brown hair. No visible weapons, no armor, just a simple gray uniform. The creature looked impossibly fragile compared to the other competitors. "And they dare to enter the war games?" HFY's laughter resonated through his translator, drawing attention from nearby officers. "This must be some kind of joke. Look at it down there, surrounded by real warriors." The human in question was Captain Sarah Chen, though HFY had no interest in learning the creature's name. She moved with quiet confidence through the preparation area, seemingly unbothered by the stares and whispered comments from other species. While massive aliens tested their strength against reinforced barriers and energy beings practiced manipulating matter, she simply stood in meditation, eyes closed. "Commander," another Catharan officer approached, "shall I inform the organizers that we object to this human's participation? It seems almost cruel to allow such a weak creature to compete." HFY waved a dismissive hand. "Let it stay. When I crush this pathetic being in the first round, it will serve as an excellent demonstration of Catharan superiority. The galaxy needs reminding of who rules the battlefield." The opening ceremony commenced with great fanfare. Queen Veltara herself appeared via hologram to address the competitors. Her imposing figure towered over the assembly as she spoke of honor, strength, and the glory of combat. HFY stood at attention, pride swelling in his chest as the Queen's gaze seemed to linger on him. "Warriors of the galaxy," the Queen announced, "you have come here to prove your worth, to demonstrate the martial prowess of your peoples. Only one shall emerge victorious, earning the right to serve at my side as Supreme Battle Commander." The Queen's eyes swept across the assembled fighters, and HFY was certain she would soon be calling his name. After all, he had won this competition 3 times running. The position of Supreme Battle Commander was practically his birthright. The first phase of the competition was announced: individual combat trials against automated defense systems. Each competitor would face increasingly difficult waves of combat drones, with their performance measured by survival time, efficiency, and tactical innovation. HFY watched with growing amusement as his turn approached. The human had been assigned to compete directly before him, which he saw as perfect timing. The crowd would see the stark contrast between a primitive creature's desperate struggle and a true warrior's dominance. Captain Chen stepped into the combat arena, a sterile white chamber that could generate any battlefield scenario. The arena's AI announced her parameters. Human designation Sarah Chen. No recorded combat enhancements. Standard projectile weapons authorized. A simple rifle materialized in her hands, looking almost primitive compared to the energy weapons most species preferred. Zexhai scoffed. It needs artificial weapons to even attempt combat. How pathetic. The first wave of drones activated. These were basic units, designed to test reflexes and aim. Most competitors dispatched them quickly through brute force or special abilities. Zexhai expected the human to struggle even with these simple opponents. Instead, something remarkable happened. Chen moved like liquid mercury, each step perfectly calculated. Her rifle cracked repeatedly, and drone after drone fell from precise headshots. But it wasn't just her accuracy that impressed the watching crowd. It was her economy of movement. While other species relied on overwhelming force or supernatural abilities, she used pure skill and tactical thinking. The second wave launched, heavier drones with shields and return fire capabilities. Most competitors had to take cover or use their natural armor to absorb hits. Chen simply wasn't there when the shots arrived. She moved between the energy blasts as if she could predict their trajectories, her rifle singing its deadly song. "Impossible," Zexhai muttered, leaning forward. The creature should be overwhelmed by now. The third wave materialized. Adaptive drones that learned from their opponents' tactics. These units had stumped several previous competitors, forcing them to constantly evolve their strategies. Chen paused for exactly 3 seconds, studying the new opponents, then smiled. What followed was a masterclass in tactical adaptation. She began using the arena's environment in ways the designers had never intended, ricocheting shots off walls to hit drones from impossible angles, using the enemy's own weapons against them by shooting their projectiles out of the air to create explosions, creating improvised traps from debris. The fourth wave was unprecedented. The arena AI, clearly impressed, deployed its most challenging scenario, a full battalion of heavy assault drones with air support. No competitor had ever reached this level. Chen's expression never changed. She simply checked her weapon's ammunition, took a deep breath, and went to work. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for centuries. Using nothing but human cunning, she turned the drones' numerical advantage against them. She caused cascade failures in their formations. She used psychological warfare, making the AI-controlled units hesitate by creating false patterns. She fought for over an hour against odds that would have crushed most armies. When the last drone fell, the arena fell silent. Captain Chen stood among the wreckage, barely breathing hard, her rifle still smoking. The scoreboard showed results that shattered every previous record. Zexhai stared in shock. His mandibles hung open as the implications hit him. This small, seemingly fragile creature had just demonstrated tactical brilliance that put his own 3 victories to shame. The human hadn't relied on superior strength, natural armor, or mystical powers. She had used pure human ingenuity and adaptability. "Commander," his aide whispered nervously, "your turn is next." Zexhai looked down at his own weapons, his natural armor, his enhanced reflexes that had made him legendary. Suddenly, they felt inadequate. The Queen's premier soldier, who had spent his life believing in the superiority of raw power, was beginning to understand that he might have encountered something far more dangerous than any weapon: intelligence. As he walked toward the arena entrance, Zexhai realized that everything he thought he knew about warfare was about to be challenged by a species that turned weakness into strength and limitations into advantages. The human had not just completed the trial. She had redefined what was possible. The Queen's hologram flickered back to life, her expression unreadable as she studied the unprecedented scores. For the first time in his military career, Zexhai wondered if his position as premier soldier was truly secure. The war games had only just begun. Zexhi's performance in the arena felt hollow despite his technical victory. He had cleared the drone waves faster than any previous competitor except the human, but the efficiency felt mechanical, predictable. Where Captain Chen had shown innovation, he had relied on brute force. Where she had demonstrated tactical creativity, he had simply overpowered his opponents. The crowd's reaction told the story. They cheered for his display of Kithaeron might, but their whispers were all about the human's unprecedented performance. Zexhi caught fragments of conversation as he exited the arena. Did you see how she predicted the drone formations? 17 different tactical adaptations in a single combat sequence. No natural armor, no enhanced strength, and she still broke every record. As the preliminary results were announced, Zexhi found himself studying Captain Chen from across the staging area. She sat quietly, methodically cleaning her rifle with practiced movements. Other competitors gave her a wide berth, but not from fear. It was respect, and that bothered Zexhi more than outright terror would have. The second phase of the War Games was announced: strategic command scenarios. Each competitor would be given control of a simulated fleet and tasked with achieving victory against increasingly complex opponents. This was Zexhi's strongest area. Tactical genius was his specialty, honed through decades of real combat experience. Now we will see the truth, he told his aide confidently. Individual combat tricks are one thing, but commanding fleets requires true strategic vision. This human cannot possibly understand the complexities of three-dimensional space warfare. The scenarios began with simple engagements, small fleets against equally matched opponents. Most competitors performed adequately, employing standard formation tactics and conventional strategies. Zexhi dominated these early rounds, his experience showing as he outmaneuvered opponents with textbook precision. Then came Chen's turn. The human stared at the tactical display for a long moment, studying the fleet composition and enemy positions. Zexhi expected to see confusion, perhaps desperation, as she realized the complexity of interstellar warfare. Instead, Chen smiled that same quiet smile from the combat arena. Her opening moves made no sense. She divided her fleet in ways that violated every principle of space combat doctrine. She sent her heavy cruisers on wide flanking maneuvers that left them isolated and vulnerable. Her destroyers moved in patterns that seemed random, almost chaotic. "The creature has no idea what it's doing," Zexhi laughed to the other Kithaeron officers. "Watch how quickly the enemy capitalizes on these amateur mistakes." But the enemy AI didn't capitalize, because there were no mistakes. As the battle progressed, Zexhi watched in growing amazement as Chen's seemingly chaotic movements revealed their true purpose. Her scattered cruisers weren't isolated, they were perfectly positioned to create crossfire zones that the enemy couldn't escape. Her destroyers weren't moving randomly, they were executing a three-dimensional pincer movement that the AI couldn't detect until it was too late. "Impossible," Zexhi whispered. "Those maneuvers aren't in any tactical manual." "Perhaps that's the point, Commander," his aide replied quietly. The human was rewriting the rules of engagement in real time. She used unconventional formations that confused enemy targeting systems. She employed psychological warfare against AI opponents by creating patterns that seemed logical but led to traps. Most remarkably, she turned every disadvantage into an advantage. When her flagship came under heavy fire, instead of retreating, she used it as bait to draw the enemy into a carefully prepared kill zone. When her communications were jammed, she implemented a backup command system using navigation beacons that the enemy never detected. When faced with superior numbers, she created the illusion of even greater forces through clever use of sensor shadows and debris fields. The scenarios grew more complex. Fleet battles became multi-faction engagements with shifting alliances and dynamic objectives. Other competitors began struggling, falling back on rigid doctrines that couldn't adapt to the changing conditions. Zexhai maintained his performance through experience and natural tactical ability, but even he found the later scenarios challenging. Chen thrived. She seemed to intuitively understand the chaos of multi-sided warfare. Where others saw confusion, she found opportunity. She negotiated temporary alliances that served her immediate needs, then dissolved them before they became disadvantageous. She used her opponent's expectations against them, appearing weak when she was strong and striking when they expected retreat. In the final strategic scenario, Chen faced a situation that had never been solved in the war games' history. A three-way battle where she commanded the smallest fleet against two larger alliances that had agreed to eliminate her before turning on each other. Previous competitors had managed to survive for varying lengths of time, but victory was considered impossible. Chen studied the scenario for exactly 90 seconds, then began issuing commands. What followed was a masterpiece of strategic thinking that would be studied in military academies for generations. She didn't try to fight both enemy fleets directly. Instead, she manipulated the battle space itself. Using asteroid fields and stellar phenomena, she created conditions that forced her enemies to compete for advantageous positions. She made herself appear to be a greater threat to each alliance than they were to each other, disrupting their cooperation. Through a series of perfectly timed strikes and withdrawals, she managed to get the two larger fleets to effectively destroy each other while conserving her own forces. When the dust settled, her small fleet faced the scattered remains of both enemy forces and achieved total victory through a combination of tactical brilliance and pure human cunning. The command center fell silent. Even the AI systems seemed to pause as they processed what had just occurred. The Queen's hologram materialized with unprecedented clarity, her ancient eyes fixed on the small human who had just redefined the art of war. "Remarkable!" the Queen's voice echoed through the chamber. "In 800 years of war games, no competitor has ever solved the Omega scenario." Zexhai stared at the tactical display, trying to understand how Chen had achieved the impossible. His mind raced through the battle sequence, analyzing every decision, every movement. Slowly, reluctantly, he began to comprehend the depth of strategic thinking that the human had demonstrated. She hadn't just won. She had revealed new possibilities in warfare that no one had ever conceived. Her tactics weren't in any manual because they represented entirely new schools of thought. She had taken the accumulated military wisdom of dozens of species and evolved beyond it in real time. "Commander Zexhai," the announcement came. "Please prepare for the strategic scenarios." Zexhai walked to the command station, his confidence shaken for the first time in his career. How do you follow perfection? How do you compete against someone who doesn't just play the game better, but changes the rules entirely? As he began his own trials, Zexhai found himself thinking not about victory, but about understanding. This human had shown him that there were levels of strategic thinking he had never imagined. Raw power and conventional tactics suddenly seemed primitive in comparison to the elegant complexity of Chen's approach. The Queen's premier soldier was beginning to realize that perhaps the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy wasn't a particle cannon or a psychic blast. Perhaps it was the boundless creativity of a species that refused to accept limitations and turned every challenge into an opportunity for innovation. The final phase of the war games awaited, and for the first time in his life, Zexhai was uncertain of victory. The human had not just matched his abilities, she had transcended them, and the most humbling part was that she made it look effortless, as if redefining warfare was simply what humans did when presented with interesting problems. The galaxy was about to learn that underestimating humanity was the gravest tactical error of all. The final phase of the war games, arrived with unprecedented anticipation. Word of the humans' performances had spread throughout the station, and representatives from across the galaxy gathered to witness what many were calling the most remarkable competition in Imperial history. The final trial was announced: personal combat between the top three competitors. Zexhai had secured his position through decades of experience and natural Kitharan advantages. The second finalist was General Korath, a Vorthon berserker whose rage-enhanced strength could shatter starship hulls. And then there was Captain Chen, the human who had already redefined what was possible in warfare. Queen Veltara herself materialized in full presence rather than hologram, her towering form commanding absolute attention. Ancient beyond measure, she had ruled the Empire for over 1,000 years, and her word was law across 17 star systems. "My subjects," the Queen's voice resonated with power that made the station's hull vibrate. "Today we witness the culmination of strength, skill, and strategic brilliance. The victor will serve as my supreme battle commander, leading the Imperial forces in the great expansion to come." Zexhai felt the familiar surge of anticipation. This was what he had trained for his entire life: personal combat, where his natural advantages and centuries of Kitharan military tradition would prove decisive. Surely the humans' tricks would fail against raw, overwhelming force. The combat arena expanded into a massive facility with varied terrain, urban environments, forest regions, desert wastelands, and technological zones. Each fighter would face the others in single combat, with the overall victor determined by performance across all environments. The first match pitted Zexhai against General Korath. It was a brutal affair, showcasing the raw power that had made both species feared throughout the galaxy. Korath's berserker rage granted him incredible strength, but Zexhai's tactical mind and natural armor allowed him to weather the storm and emerge victorious through superior strategy and endurance. As he stood over the defeated Vorthon, Zexhai felt his confidence returning. This was familiar territory. This was what he understood. The human might have clever tricks, but in the end, warfare came down to strength, speed, and the will to survive. Then came Chen's match against Korath. The Vorthon general had recovered sufficiently for combat, his natural regeneration having healed the worst of his injuries. He entered the arena with the same berserker fury that had served him well throughout the competition. Chen stood opposite him, looking almost fragile in comparison, armed only with basic equipment and her inexplicable confidence. Korath's opening charge could have shattered reinforced barriers. He moved with the speed of a tactical missile, his massive fists crackling with energy that could pulverize stone. Any sane opponent would have fled or relied on heavy armor and superior weapons. Chen did neither. She moved at the last possible second, not away from the charge but alongside it. Her hand touched Korath's arm as he passed, and suddenly the massive Vorthon was airborne, his own momentum turned against him. He crashed into the arena wall with enough force to crack the reinforced structure. "Impossible," Zexhai breathed. "She has no enhanced strength. How did she—" But Chen wasn't finished. As Korath recovered and charged again, she demonstrated something that would haunt Zexhai's dreams. She had studied her opponent. Every previous match, every movement, every tactical decision had been analyzed and understood. She knew exactly how Korath would attack, and she was ready. What followed was a demonstration of human martial arts that transcended anything in the galactic combat records. Chen used leverage, timing, and perfect understanding of physics to turn Korath's massive strength into a weakness. Every attack he launched was redirected. Every charge became an opportunity for counterattack. More terrifyingly, she was teaching herself his patterns in real time. Each exchange showed greater understanding, more precise counters. By the time Korath realized what was happening, he was fighting an opponent who knew his moves better than he did. The match ended with Korath unconscious on the arena floor, defeated not through superior force, but through pure skill and adaptability. Chen had taken everything that made the Vorthon general dangerous and turned it against him. The arena fell silent except for Chen's steady breathing. She showed no exhaustion, no strain, just the calm satisfaction of a problem well solved. When she looked up at the observation deck, her eyes met Zexhai's, and he saw something that chilled him to his core: recognition. She had been studying him, too. The final match was announced: Commander Zexhai versus Captain Chen. As Zexhai entered the arena, his mind raced through everything he had witnessed. The human's tactical brilliance, her adaptability, her ability to turn every advantage against itself. How do you fight an opponent who learns from every exchange? You fight well for a primitive creature, Zexhai said as they faced each other, trying to maintain some psychological advantage. But you face a true warrior now. I have conquered worlds while your species was still trapped on a single planet. Chen tilted her head slightly, studying him with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. Commander Zexhai, she said quietly. May I ask you something? The question caught him off guard. In the middle of a combat arena, facing the most important fight of his career, the human wanted to talk. What? He demanded. In all your conquests, all your victories, have you ever wondered what you might learn from your enemies instead of simply defeating them? The question was so unexpected, so profound, that Zexhai actually hesitated. Learn from enemies? The concept was foreign to Kitharan military doctrine. Enemies were obstacles to overcome, territories to claim, populations to subjugate. What could be learned from creatures too weak to defend themselves? That moment of hesitation cost him. Chen moved with fluid grace, not attacking, but positioning. By the time Zexhai realized what was happening, she had studied his stance, his weight distribution, his preferred combat angles. The fight began in earnest, and Zexhai discovered something terrifying. She was better than him. Not stronger, not faster, not enhanced by technology or natural evolution. Simply better. Every technique he employed she countered with something more efficient. Every strategy he attempted she anticipated with perfect precision. His centuries of experience meant nothing against her ability to adapt and improve in real time. But the most humbling aspect of the combat wasn't Chen's skill. It was her restraint. Zexhai gradually realized that she could have ended the fight at any point. Instead, she was demonstrating, teaching, showing him the flaws in his technique and the limitations of his thinking. When she finally disabled his weapons and left him defenseless on the arena floor, it was almost gentle. No unnecessary violence, no humiliation, just the precise application of skill to achieve a necessary objective. Queen Veltara descended into the arena, her ancient eyes moving between the defeated Kitharan commander and the small human who stood calmly among the wreckage of everything he had thought he knew about warfare. Captain Sarah Chen, the Queen's voice carried a note of something Zexhai had never heard before. Wonder. In 1,000 years of rule, I have never witnessed such a demonstration of tactical brilliance and adaptability. You have earned the right to serve as Supreme Battle Commander. But Chen did something that shocked everyone present. She bowed respectfully to the Queen, then shook her head. Your Majesty, I am honored, but I must decline. The arena fell silent. No one had ever refused the Queen's offer of supreme command. I came here not to claim power, Chen continued, but to understand, to learn from the greatest military minds in the galaxy, and to share what humanity might offer in return. Commander Zexhai, General Korath, all of the competitors here, they have shown me tactical concepts and strategic thinking that will advance human understanding for generations. She turned to Zexhai, extending her hand. But perhaps more importantly, I hope I've shown that true strength doesn't come from conquest or domination. It comes from the willingness to learn, to adapt, and to find solutions that benefit everyone. Zexhai stared at the offered hand, his mind reeling. This creature, this human, had demonstrated superiority in every aspect of warfare, then offered to share that knowledge freely. She had won the right to command the Empire's forces, then turned it down in favor of cooperation. Slowly, the Queen's premier soldier reached out and grasped the human's hand. Queen Veltara watched this exchange with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of imperial authority mixed with newfound respect. Captain Chen, if you will not serve as Supreme Battle Commander, then perhaps you would consider a different role. The Empire has much to learn from your people, and it seems humanity has much to offer. Would you serve as Special Envoy for Human-Imperial Relations? Chen smiled, the same quiet expression that had preceded every impossible achievement. I would be honored, Your Majesty. And I believe this arrangement will benefit both our peoples far more than conquest ever could. As the arena emptied and the war games concluded, Zexhai found himself walking beside the human who had redefined his understanding of strength and strategy. For the first time in his career, he was thinking not about his next victory, but about what he might learn from this remarkable species that turned every limitation into an advantage. The Queen's premier soldier had been humbled, but more importantly, he had been educated. And perhaps that was the most human thing of all, turning defeat into an opportunity for growth and showing that true strength lay not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to understand and improve. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not through conquest, but through the quiet demonstration that there was always a better way, and the universe would never be the same.